Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to our forum, the State of Education in Rockville Center. My name is Donna Downing, and along with Kathy Baxley, we are this year's co-presidents of the Rockville Center Council of PTAs, which is comprised of representatives from all 5 elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school. The current conditions of public education in New York State are often confusing, with new directives coming out almost daily from the State Education Department. Parents' strongly held opinions about testing and opting out, Common Core, as well as updates to the New York State Regents exams and high school graduation requirements. The best way to face these and other challenges is with information. We come together tonight to continue an ongoing dialogue between parents and our school administration. We held an evening forum similar to this one 2 years ago, and a daytime Q&A session last spring. Given the confusing state of education in New York, parents have asked us, what does this mean for my child in the Rockville Center schools? We would like to thank our panelists for coming tonight, and before we introduce them, we would also like to thank Fran Gumella, Jackie Wong, Lauren Bella, Robert Krager, Rob Lichter, our PTA presidents, and members of PTA Council from each of our buildings for their help in arranging this evening. We are very fortunate tonight to have panel representatives from the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, as well as members of central administration. This evening really does have something for everyone.
Hello. I'm going to introduce tonight's panelists, so when I say your name, just give a little wave. First, we have Dr. Johnson, Superintendent, right here. Mr. Pelletieri, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. And joining him from his office is Dr. Sampino, Curriculum Coordinator. Dr. Leahy, Assistant Superintendent of Pupil Personnel Services and Special Education. Mr. Murphy, Principal of Southside High School. Mr. Chung, Assistant Principal at Southside High School. Ms. McGinn, Principal at Southside Middle School. Mr. Raymar, Principal at Covert. And we have 2 elementary teachers, Ms. Bonino, who's the math implementation teacher in elementary, and Ms. DiMartino, Academic Intervention Services teacher and reading specialist. So the format for this evening will begin with introductory remarks from Dr. Johnson. And then Donna and I will travel with microphones throughout the audience to take your questions for the panel. You don't have to come up here, we'll come to you, just raise your hand. A few rules to keep things organized, please. If you would like a certain panelist to answer your question, you may direct it to them, or you can ask a general question and we'll figure out who best to take it on. We absolutely encourage you to ask questions, but we do ask that you refrain from revealing too much personal information about your child. As we remind you, this is a public forum and it will be shown on the school channel and on rvcschools.org. In the interest of time and fairness, if you've asked a question, you are permitted 1 follow-up question. We do have some questions that were emailed to us ahead of time, and we will ask those in between the audience questions. So to begin, I'd like to introduce Dr. Johnson. He's serving in his 30th year as superintendent of the Rockville Center School District. Honored last year as one of Education Week's Leaders to Learn From, Dr. Johnson was named Superintendent of the Year in 2005 by the American Association of School Administrators. He has served as president of the New York State Council of School Superintendents and chairman of its Curriculum Committee. Dr. Johnson speaks widely on issues concerning state aid to school districts and previously chaired the State Aid Data Analysis Group. He was appointed by Governor Pataki to the Commission on Education Reform in 2005 and continues to advise the State Ed Department on issues ranging from funding to curriculum to testing. Please welcome Dr. Johnson.
After that introduction, it's time to go home. Thank you very much. Probably the most important thing that was somewhat left out of that is that I'm part of a team, and I think what you need to understand is that we in the school district take very, very seriously the work of not just living with the standards and making sure that all of our children, when they graduate from Southside High School, are adequately prepared to continue their education. But we work assiduously every day to make sure that the instruction that goes on in the classroom is meaningful and in fact appropriate, and in fact lives up to all of the high standards that not only you have for your children, but you have for this school district, and what we have always hoped for, but have been somewhat disappointed in, what the state has been doing with us for the last few years. Part of the reason for the confusion with which we are living right now is that there is some disarray in the way in which people are either interpreting or understanding what is happening. And so what we're trying to do is to clear it up. I'm going to spend a little time and then move on as quickly as we possibly can to questions. If it seems a little bit disjointed, it is because we're going to jump from topic to topic. But the first that I'd like to address really has to do with a little bit of the history of the Common Core, where it began. The state of New York in 2010 adopted the Common Core. We very shortly thereafter adopted the Common Core here in Rockville Center, and quite frankly, it was universally supported throughout New York State as being one of the best changes that we've seen in a long time, and one that most of us in the profession felt was a step in the direction of, in fact, moving away from an inch deep and a mile wide to something that was, in fact, going to provide our children the opportunity to study far more in depth. So there was lots of conversation about improving the standards in New York State, and in fact, developing a system in the state that was going to get our children college and career ready. Part of the problem was not that the standards were wrong, or it was the way in which New York State decided to, in fact, implement them. In the 2012 and 13 school year, something came out which we call the modules. It was widely understood that this was New York State's interpretation of, in fact, the curriculum that should be adopted by most school districts in the state. Many did, in fact, adopt it as if it were curriculum. The state very quickly came out and in fact, instead of calling it curriculum, in fact, decided to call them modules. These were suggested, they were not mandated, and in fact, in more recent months, and more recently, as a matter of fact, this past weekend, I was talking to the Commissioner of Education, and she, in fact, said essentially that the modules were only a suggestion, never meant to be mandated, never meant to be implemented the way in which many people thought they should. What she has said recently, and I think it's very, very important, because as we begin to move forward, the leadership at the state is going to be a critical mass, and in fact, what transpires over the next few years. What essentially she is saying right now is that the state is not going to stay in the business of developing curriculum. The Common Core is going to be rewritten. They are in the process of doing this right now. As some of you may be aware, the governor of this state, in fact, put together a task force, a report of which came out in December. It was very quickly sent over to the regents. The regents essentially adopted it. It had 21 various recommendations, probably the most important of which, for us, has to do with the rewrite of the standards for New York State. So they're not abandoning entirely the Common Core, but they have said that there were a number of missteps in its implementation. They understand that a lot of it is inappropriate for many of our children. They're going to go back and re-examine it, and probably as much as 25 or 30% of it will in fact be new. The time frame within which she is going to be operating with her staff and with the various people throughout New York State that will be invited to participate in this new endeavor is sometime in December. So between now and late fall or early December, we are probably going to have a new set of standards for New York State. I'm going to put that aside for the moment and understand that when you have new standards, it's very clear that she said to us that we're out of the business of writing new curriculum. We are going to push back, and it's now going to be left up entirely to the local school district to develop curriculum on the basis of the standards that their regents will adopt. Let's talk for a minute about the 3 through 8 assessment. In the spring of 2013, the first edition of the state exam appeared, and it was a mess. It was never thought to be anywhere near the level of difficulty that most people experienced that very first year that it emerged. It did not involve many people in New York State in its development. It never gave teachers the opportunity to teach for any extended period of time. Just understand that the process generally, from standard to curriculum to test, usually is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. From the time that New York State adopted this to the time that there was an operational test put before children was 2 years. Nowhere nearly the amount of time necessary in order to adequately prepare our children from an instructional point of view to be able to take this test and to do well on it. So, let me focus a little bit on the 3 through 8 testing. Since many of us have children in those grades, and in fact, that has been the focal point of the opt-out movement here in Nassau County and New York State. Upwards of 200,000 children, as you know, last year decided not to take the 3 through 8 tests. Why? What was wrong? What was going on? The state, clearly, and I'm not going to embark on any criticism that I may in fact have, I just think we need to understand that the state has essentially admitted that the test was not valid. So in other words, it was not measuring what it was intended to measure. And so what the state has done is to say essentially that we as a school district are no longer permitted to use the information that we get from children to either place them into programs or in fact to use it for promotional purposes. That's been very clear. That emerged from the legislature, the governor, and our state education department have been unanimous in their support of the fact that we are not supposed to be using this to make these very, very important decisions about the children that we serve in this community or any place else in New York State. The unnecessarily difficult and complicated nature of the questions was another thorn in the side of the state. The fact that it was going to be somewhat problematic has led the state now to say, okay, we are going to abandon this test and we are moving to something new. They have and we have a new company, as some of you may have heard. The company that developed the last test was a company by the name of Pearson. The company that they have hired to do the new test is a company called Questar. There are many of us who do not feel that Questar is really up to the task of developing it in a timely fashion. However, state test data in New York State has traditionally been used for accountability purposes, to measure student performance, and more recently, in fact, to try to measure teacher performance. That has been a seriously problematic element that was introduced to the test prior to its administration in 2013, which made it, and I just told you it was unnecessarily difficult, but it was also much longer than it needed to be in order to create a test that did two things, not one. If in fact we are going to measure student performance, as many of you now know, in the school district we use a test called the NWEA. We are able to use it effectively to measure the performance of kids in about 45 minutes who sit at a computer. There's no need for 3 sessions of an hour and a half each in both reading and math, and for a test to take anywhere from 7 to 9 hours for a child. The state has recognized that and said, okay, we need to step back. We are going to re-examine what we have done in the past, and we are going to change it dramatically. It is clear to us in conversations that we have had recently with the Commissioner of Education that they want a shorter test. In fact, they have taken steps this year, in fact, to shorten the test. The problem is that in doing some of these things, they have, in fact, created even a less valid test than they did before. For example, they invited teachers, it sounds like a very good idea, to come visit with them in Albany, take a look at the operational test items that, in fact, could appear before children in April of this year, and in fact modify those questions on the basis of what they, as teachers, experienced in the classroom. By doing that, they essentially walked away from all of the data that was collected on field tests related to each one of those items, and essentially, from a technical point of view, invalidated the test. So the more that you begin to rely upon just anecdotal information, as they were doing at that point, the more they were creating an environment in which the results of this test could not be used for its intended purpose. The other thing that's very important for us to consider is the commissioner has said that she is a reading teacher, which she's much more interested in just not knowing that kids sit for an hour and a half 3 times and then take the test in a time setting. But in fact, what they wanted to do was to create an environment in which kids could just work until they finished. So we got this directive recently that the test now is untimed. Now that sounds like a great idea until I turn to the principals and say, now it's your turn, what are we going to do? That essentially means that any child can take as long as they need to in order to complete the work on a test. And it's not up to us to intercede on their behalf, even if we see them struggling. It is up to them to decide when, in fact, the test is over, not us. So an untimed version of a test is essentially, well, it looks like student-centered. It, in fact, does create a very serious logistical problem for us at this end in terms of trying to put together where children are going to take it, how long they're going to take it, can they go to lunch, can they go to the bathroom, a number of other things which generally would automatically invalidate the results of an exam. All of this with the intention of, in fact, improving the test. I applaud them for recognizing that it needs to be changed. I don't think that the work that they've done has, in fact, brought about significant changes in the test. I think it's unfortunate that they are not taking a more careful look at opting at this point to adopt a measure similar to the NWEA, which is what we call an adaptive test, and one which is computer-based. But nevertheless, they have sworn that this is, in fact, the direction in which the state is going to move. Let's talk about opt-out for a moment. What does that mean? It essentially means that while the school district is responsible to offer to every single child who comes to take the exam the opportunity to take it, and we intend to do exactly what our responsibility is as a school district. Every single child who shows up on that day and says he wants to take that exam will in fact be offered the opportunity to do so. He will be done very respectfully. We have to honor the decisions that families will make or that children will make in order to ensure that this happens well. We have asked, and I've written a letter to parents and asked them to please let us know in advance what the decisions of their family are with regard to either taking the exam or not. This will allow our principals, in fact, to divide the children in either on that day or in advance and make it comfortable for all of the kids that we have within the school district. We do not want to, under any circumstance, have a child who sits for that exam feel that they are being in any way punished by us. We don't want them to be disrespected. So in fact, it's going to be very, very important that they be treated with exactly the same respect that they deserve because they are honoring what the state is asking them to do. I'm going to jump again, this time to math. I mentioned to you a little while ago that the Common Core is going to be redone. I can tell you for a fact that there are some very serious problems with the math curriculum and the math standards. There is a debate underway right now, and one of the reasons why we have some of our high school staff with us this evening is, in fact, hopefully, possibly to engage some of you in a conversation about the math sequence, particularly at the high school. I know we've had a number of complaints over time. I suspect many other people in communities somewhat baffled by the way in which their children are learning math in the elementary grades and in the middle school years. But that being aside, putting that aside, one of the real problems that we have is with the math sequence at the high school. And the reason I bring it up now is because we're at a critical stage. Algebra 1, which was given 2 years ago to our students for the first time, which was a Common Core exam, was done so in a way in which they allowed us to not just take the Common Core, but to take the 2005 exam within that same year. For students to do that, they had to agree to do both. The alignment between the two curriculums was about somewhere between 80 and 90%. So that when we taught the 2005 curriculum, which we did, and the reason for doing it is that we know that it prepares kids very well for both our pre-calculus courses as juniors and then calculus later on, and should they choose to do so, statistics as well, as seniors. The same scenario played out the year following for geometry, where kids were allowed to take both the Common Core and the 2005 version of the set of standards. And our kids took both and, quite frankly, did well on both. What's happened this year is that Algebra 2 is a severe departure from the traditional course in algebra that we are accustomed to in New York State. It has clearly moved in the direction of being one that favors very strongly statistics, moved away from trig, and in fact has in no way finds itself aligned. Only for about 40%, maybe 50% of the curriculum overlaps with the 2005 curriculum. So our students who will be taking this in early June are going to have a serious problem. They're going to walk in and see questions that they don't recognize, they don't know. But in order for us to gain access to the exam given later during the last week in June, we must have our students take this exam. We pleaded with the state to do otherwise. They know fully well, but because they had traditionally done the first exam and the second exam this way, they said we must do the third as well. Despite the fact that they know that the two do not align, and that if you teach to one, you're not teaching to the other, and that if you choose to prepare kids for the 2005, then in fact you're going to be in serious trouble with the Common Core. That's a problem. It's not insurmountable. Our efforts are to prepare kids well for the 2005. We think your children will in fact be adequately prepared and will do just fine. However, they're going to have to sit through an experience which can be a little bit unnerving because they're going to see questions that they don't know. Why do I bring this up at this point as well? And it is that we have been meeting recently with members of the Board of Regents. We have been meeting with the State Education Department and with the Commissioner of Education. They are all saying we are going to rewrite the math curriculum. They recognize that it is a serious problem, that there is something of a mismatch between the current curriculum, which seems to be much more leaning in the direction of preparing kids for statistics than it is for calculus, for the sciences, for math, or for engineering. Somebody made that decision to reroute the math curriculum in a direction which it had not traditionally been doing. It's going to be redone. Our problem is it's not going to be redone until December, and we have to make a decision very soon about what we're going to be doing in the fall, and quite frankly, in the fall we have no choice except to go with the Common Core Algebra 2. If you're having a hard time making sense of this, welcome to New York. We're all struggling. Not just me. I must tell you that the people that I work with at the State Education Department, our regent, Roger Tillis, and in fact the leadership team that they put together in the State Ed Department are most cognizant of the problems that we have and are more than willing to work on it. Our problem right now is timing. There are still decisions that families have got to make now. You have got to make some very, very serious decisions about what you're going to be doing with your children in April, some of you in June. And what I'm here to say is that we are here, and I say that when I say we, I mean our team is here to in fact provide you an opportunity to bring to us any questions and concerns that you may have about the condition of what we live with here in Rockville Center. So again, mine was just a kind of a cursory overview of some of the areas of problems that we are dealing with on a regular basis here in the state of New York and here in Rockville Center. And what I'm hoping is that through the questions, we will be able to kind of add to the fabric of your understanding so that you can walk away as fully knowledgeable as you need to be to make decisions about your children in the upcoming weeks. So, here we go.
All right, hit us with your questions. Our mics are live.
Good evening, Dr. Dunstan. My name is Michael McFeely. Thank you for your service. Your reputation certainly precedes you, and thank you all of you for being here tonight. My one question remains, Rockville Center is one of the best districts in the country, and it seems like everyone is against this. Where is this gaining its traction for it to even be an issue that we're here to discuss? Who is for it? I came tonight to try to, maybe I would hear both sides, but I'm only hearing the one side that is against it. Who is for this? Is there anyone that has anything good to say about it? If so, I would like to hear that before I make the decision for my family. Thank you.
You're going to hear me say a lot of good things about the Common Core. And to be very honest with you, we are very much in favor of quality education. We are not here just to trash everything. What we try to do is acknowledge and recognize that we're living through a very difficult time, that some mistakes were made. The state has acknowledged and recognized that those mistakes are made, and that we're going to work assiduously with our members, with our friends in the State Education Department to make things better. I will tell you and assure you that we are an IB school district, an IB school. We have always looked to accountability models that externally enable us to validate the program that we have in the school district. At the high school level, we have always used the IB program and the State Regents program, and on the basis of that data alone, we have been able to judge the efficacy of our instructional program. More recently, we have been very disappointed with the data that we've gotten from the state, but we've not been all that disappointed with the quality of what we've found in the standards, so that as we begin to take a look at them and examine them, there's an awful lot of really good, we want to call it stuff, that's there that can be taken from it and in fact help us improve instruction in our classes, and we've done that. And maybe some of the teachers who are here tonight can possibly talk or address some of the things that they have done over the past years. Since 2010, when the Common Core was adopted nationally and then in New York State, it really was applauded for, I think, that doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think there's a recognition nationally that it needs to be somewhat changed. Is there another side to this? I wish there wasn't a side so we don't have to fight over this thing. I think what's far more productive, and I find it a welcome conversation that we've been having with the state, is a recognition that we are living through a difficult time. I think we all share the same common goal, which is to make sure that our children, when they finish high school, are adequately prepared to continue their education. And that at the end of the day, both the State Education Department and we are on the same side. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get there together and not making the same mistakes that we made before. Great question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hello. I have a high school sophomore. She's been in that group that's been taking the 2 tests for the past 2 years.
Yes.
And I guess she's going to be doing it again this year. And I'm just, we're at the point in our experience that now she's starting to worry about colleges. How come we've had to take 2 tests? Which test is going to count? Going forward, why do we have to take the 2 tests this year? And what is the consequences of the colleges looking at her application? What scores are they going to see? What's the long-term results of having to take these 2 tests year after year, and what scores are going to count?
I'll ask Mr. Murphy to answer part of that, but I can give you the answer from the state. Let me reiterate what I said a few moments ago. We have to give both exams because the state said we have to. In order for your children to gain access to the second, they have to take the first. There are many school districts in the state who opted to do only the Common Core this year. Some of them are regretting it because they're not preparing their kids adequately for either pre-calculus or calculus. But nevertheless, the state, in order to do that, has said we must take both. John or Donald, I don't know if you want to add?
Other than the fact that the state mandated that we take both of them, the reason that we allied ourselves with the Algebra 2 Trig Regents is, among other things, it has a proven track record of preparing students for the calculus that comes afterwards, which is the real ulterior motive, as well as the fact that we have an instructional background that we can predict student achievement based on prior results. The Algebra 2 Regents, there are no prior exams as a frame of reference, so we felt it wasn't a student-centered decision to focus exclusively on that, which explains why we went predominantly with the Algebra 2 Trig Regents for our instruction. In terms of how it affects the transcript, only the higher of the two grades will appear on the transcript. The other one disappears. So if a student scores higher, and I would hazard a guess that most, if not all, will, on the Algebra 2 Trig Regents, the other exam never happened in terms of the physical transcript. So that is our safety net, and that is why we chose it. Anything else? Okay.
But they do have to take both exams. As Dr. Johnson, it's a state requirement, and they will be taking the Algebra 2 Common Core on June 1st, and then subsequently we'll have that.
Because the state says.
Why is that a state? Is that what you said?
Why is that a state requirement? Why would they even allow two tests to be taken and the higher one? It just doesn't make sense to me that you'd be allowed to take two tests and then it doesn't, so one test doesn't mean anything then. It's just a waste of time.
Okay, you know what? I wish I could give you an adequate answer on that. I can't. I can tell you that a number of us have advocated very strongly for a slight deviation from their normal course of events and allowing kids to take the 2005 without taking the Common Core. And they said no. Very simply, no.
Hi, Dr. Johnson, and to everybody on the panel. Thank you for coming here to answer our questions tonight. My name is Tara Guyard, and my oldest is in 3rd grade. So I'm in the process really of informing myself at this point. But my question is, as you said in your own words, we're going through a period of difficulty, and the state is trying to figure things out, and the curriculum is going to be reworked. So why are we even bothering with the tests in April? Why has the state not said, you know what? We don't even really know if this is going to funnel into our ultimate purpose once we finally standardize the curriculum in December. Why are the children being forced to go through the difficult period with the people at the state who are making these decisions?
How's that silence? Is that good enough? All right, look, I can tell you that when you talk to the people in the State Ed Department, and I work with them every week, and I talk out of two sides of my mouth. I will stand here and tell you what's very wrong with the exam, and then I will work hours upon hours with the State Ed people in order to make things better. So, I mean, I live in both of those worlds. They live in another world also, and it is that they have to live with the federal requirements which mandate that a state administer an exam. They have not gotten a waiver. They are afraid they're going to lose some of their state monies, which has been threatened. Not that we would lose it, but in fact some of the monies that would then go to support the operation of the office at the State Education Department, in fact, could be lost. They are very, very concerned about losing that, and in fact felt that it was absolutely necessary, that they could not make that decision without getting permission from the feds. Feds would not give it to them. They did not get a waiver, and so consequently, we have to go forward with the exam that we currently have on the books.
So then as a follow-up to that, then I would say, is there, for a parent who's trying to decide one way or the other, this being my eldest, is there a benefit to my 9-year-old sitting through these tests? Like if everything gets worked out and next year they're going to have a test that we all love and nobody's going to opt out of, is it beneficial for my 9-year-old to sit through 3 days of math and 3 days of English? Is there any benefit to that?
I think if your child was dying to take the test and very eager, the answer would be allow them to take it. But I think from the you've answered your own question and you know the answer just because it makes no sense that the state is making our students. I mean, it makes sense in the fact that the feds, they're afraid to lose federal funding. For a child to sit there for hours and now not have a time test, I don't see the benefit, especially for a 3rd grader who very often a lot of the kids get themselves nervous about it. They're eager to please, they want to do well, and they see a test that they don't get. The questions are too advanced, the reading is too long, and now even though they're going to lessen the amount of the reading and the questions, the reality is for a kid who perseverates, a kid who's worried about it, they're going to be sitting there for hours trying to take a test. So I think the answer is, unless your child is eager and dying, what would be the benefit?
Just so you know, and let me just add one thing to that. I believe very strongly in external validation. And in fact, in the early 1990s, when everybody was saying we shouldn't be testing kids, this school district was one of the very few that actually was out there saying, why not? We really need to measure ourselves against what others believe are high standards, and therefore let's collect that data and find out how good we are in terms of measuring up to those standards. The problem is not that we are either fearful or in fact critical of the state for that action. I believe very strongly that that is in fact the job of the state. I believe very strongly that in fact there should be a test that's administered to all children in the New York State, and in fact every kid in the state should be taking it. The problem is not that. The problem is the test itself is terrible. So while I will stand here and tell you that as a sworn official of the state of New York, we want you to take the test. It's this test that is problematic. And there isn't a single person in the state education department that will stake their reputation on standing behind this test.
Hi, Dr. Johnson. Michael Ludwig. I have a 10th grader and a 7th grader. And I wonder if you could speak to the role of the legislature, because you've mentioned the governor, you've mentioned state ed, you've mentioned the regents, and my understanding is that some of the law, education law, is as a result of legislative action that the regents cannot change the policy on. And so I think we need to also focus our attention on the legislature as well as the governor, who has snuck some of these provisions into the law in sort of a midnight run. So if you could address that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I've assiduously stayed away from the acronym as APPR. It's the evaluation system that has been incorporated into the lives of teachers in New York State. It's covered under a law, not a regulation, so it is not the purview of the regents to in fact make that decision. That was a decision that was made. Actually, it was the governor's plan that he put into the state budget last year, and in order for the legislature to say no to that, they had to say no to the budget because it was in as part of the budget bill. It's called 3012D. It is, so far, the regents have taken a very strong stand and have postponed its implementation for 1 year, from September 15 to September of 16. There's lots of discussion right now about abandoning that. Part of the governor's recommendation in his task force that came out in December, number 21, was in fact to put it on hold for the next 4 years until we could come up with a satisfactory evaluation system of teachers. Now, why do I bring that up, and why is that law important? The law is important because it drives the testing program, and it essentially says that the test should look like the old Pearson model, because what it needs to accomplish is two things: measure your children and measure teachers at the same time. We've never been able to come up with a model that does that effectively. And so those of us who are professionals and understand the testing protocol that they tried to implement and failed to do so adequately need to take a step back and in fact get involved with our legislators and ask them to do exactly the same thing and abandon this law. Assemblyman Curran, by the way, our local assemblyman, he lives in Lynbrook, but he represents us here in Rockville Center, has in fact co-sponsored a bill to do exactly that. I know it's tied up in committee. I don't know if it ever will see the light of day, but I can tell you that from that perspective, that is driving the conversation about testing in part. If that gets pushed off to the side, then in fact we can then deal with a much more adequate and satisfactory discussion about what exactly is it we need to do to measure the performance of our children and to develop accountability models that allow us as a school district and schools to demonstrate the efficacy of our programs. The minute you begin to roll teachers into that equation, you begin to create instruments that are untenable to work with. So that's what the governor did. That's what the legislature passed last year. And that's the piece of legislation that I really think we need to. Once we get that off the table, and then in fact we can begin to focus on the real discussion, which is how do we measure the progress of our kids. Anybody else? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jennifer DeMarco. I'm at the Watson School. I have a 5th grader, 2nd grader, soon to be kindergarten. And I had a question about the curriculum. If we're definitely getting new standards in December, what are we going to be doing from September through December, and how are we preparing the teachers to teach this new curriculum in advance of implementing it?
Chris, why don't
smiling at that
I've been
one,
hearing
Dr.
enough
Johnson.
from me, right?
The state has promised us a more extensive look at the curriculum. Dr. Johnson talked about 25%, 30%. They said that they might change, but we don't know exactly in what area that will be. We do know that their timeline is that around next December or so, they hope to finalize what it will look like. Districts will have then till the end of that year and over that summer to start to provide some professional development for their staff, which will help obviously with teaching of the students. And then we would look at curriculum materials during that time as well, work with the teachers in terms of, again, professional development, and start to roll out those new standards during that following year. So it won't be December, whoops, put that away, let's start again. It will be, you'll have time towards the end of that year to take care of that, time over the summer to start to develop things with teachers, and then you'll have the new curriculum for rollout that September.
Yeah. Let me just add something to that, by the way. The state is saying that it's not going to abandon the Common Core, but they're going to amend it, which is very, very different. So in the absence of anything brand new, I think we can still be relatively comfortable that we will continue to use the Common Core and the curriculum that we've developed on the basis of the Common Core in our instructional programs. Just one slight correction. Standards are not curriculum. Curriculum is developed on the basis of standards. So what's going to happen is the state is going to develop a new set of standards, and then they're going to push back on us come December. Say, okay, now it's your turn. You develop the curriculum. So when Chris talks about the timeline about the following September, that burden is going to fall on our shoulders. But that'll be the first year that we're going to have an opportunity actually to implement a new curriculum based on the new standards, which means that we're probably 2, 3, or 4 years away from coming up with a test that's actually based on that new set of standards. So again, when I try to work with the state, we are always trying to figure out what the time frame and the timeline is for implementing a lot of these things, and what can we do as a transition stage. And that's where we are right now, recognizing that life will be very different in probably 3 to 5 years than it is today, and I think we'll have a satisfactory model at that point. What are we going to do in transition during the interim period of time? And we're working on that right now, and I'm really hopeful that on the basis of what has transpired in recent months, that we have a commissioner and a new set of, by the way, you have 3 new regions, a brand new majority, you're going to have a new chancellor. The world is going to be very different with the governing board on the body of regents. Things are going to start happening very, very differently in April than they have in the past. So,
Dr. Johnson, if I could just jump in on that as well. We have one overarching goal with our elementary math program, that is to prepare all students to take the algebra examination at the end of 8th grade in Ms. McGinn's school. And the standards that, we will meet the standards within that overarching goal. So our goal is not going to change. That has been our goal for quite some time. It will continue to be. And therefore, we will have that same impetus and same drive to make sure that we're successful in that regard.
Thank you.
Good evening, Michelle Sewell. Thank you very much for your time. My question is really for those in the latter part of their educational experience here in Rockville Center that are moving on to college. Has anybody spoken to the colleges? What do these scores mean for those entering the university or colleges? How is this going to impact them? On,
Regents exam?
yes.
John, do you want to take a shot?
Obviously, the question that you're referencing is just the Regents exams because the state test scores don't appear on the student's transcript. So we're really dealing with 9 through 12. State Regents exams do appear on the student's transcript, both within the final average within the coursework and as a separate entity. We have yet to see these new Common Core scores appear in the college admissions process because these are our now 9th and 10th graders. So the answer is I don't know because there hasn't been that group. Do admissions counselors look at region scores? Yes, they do, in the context of the state. So the algebra scores are fairly universally being applied. It's a statewide issue. So I think they'll matter as much as they always have been in the past.
I could just add also, the scores on the Regents exams are a data point for college admissions entry. Just one data point, and far and away the most important thing the admissions counselors still look at is the rigor of the curriculum, which that remains pretty stable here and will into the foreseeable future. So a good solid transcript with rigorous courses, as might be represented by the IB program, is really the more important factor, and that won't change. And I think the other thing, whenever there is ever a change, and we watched 2 different phases of math curriculum come through since I've been here, admissions counselors understand what's happening in the state, and it's explained in letters and explained sometimes universally if we have a universal issue.
As a former high school principal myself, I recognize that in working with colleges, they want to know, did you challenge yourself in high school? Did you take on the most rigorous course of instruction, as Dr. Leahy just said, much more so than your Common Core geometry score in 2015 or 16. They really want to see that you're taking IB, that you've made it to calculus and gotten through that course of study, much more so, again, than a particular score in a particular exam, I believe.
I have 2 emailed questions that kind of piggyback on that. This one says, my child is currently in 9th grade, the grade that was the first to take the Algebra 1 Common Core Regents last year, and will be the first to take the Geometry Common Core exam this year. Will they be prepared, and how are Rockville Center kids doing on these tests compared to students in other New York districts?
Yes, they are going to be eminently prepared. The reason that we know that is now that we have 3 seen exams for the Geometry Common Core Regents, which is the reason that we offered it twice last year. As a result of that, the curriculum is constantly being enriched, as well as the teachers have now data points, very specific questions that they're preparing the students for. Just as a caveat, the problem with the Algebra Regents last year was not a question of preparation, it was a bad test. Having said that, we're very confident now that the students in 9th grade are very well prepared for the Geometry Common Core Regents in June.
The teachers that I've spoken with who are currently teaching the geometry class have seen, as Mr. Murphy has said, has seen the 3 administrations of the exams and has modified, where necessary, the types of questions, the interpretations of the questions and the material that they have to cover that they may not have covered in prior years for the 2005 geometry course, because now it's Geometry Common Core. And teachers find that the students are adapting to it very, very well. And as far as I can see, the materials are now matching and parallel what the Common Core is. So I do expect that students will do as well, if not better, in the administration this coming June.
Actually, I'm going to ask a related question, because I have a 9th and a 10th grader. So we've seen the 2 tests, which she understands, the higher grade. But my 9th grader, so now I understand the geometry, this should look better this year. But now you said that Algebra 2 has a very different curriculum. The curriculum's not going to change in time for him in 10th grade to take Algebra 2. Is he doing more statistics to prepare for the Common Core test? Or is he going to be able to, what is his math class going to look like next year when he's in 10th?
The 10th grader will be prepared for the Algebra 2 trig. Okay?
So the 2005 test.
Right. Okay, the current 10th
But he's
grade.
usually only allowed to take,
Once.
he's the once a year. He's 9th now. 10th year, he should only be taking one
That's
Common
correct.
Core test.
That's correct.
But
And
you're
he
going to
will-
prep him for the 2005
No,
test?
the current 10th grader is being prepared for
No,
the...
I know this
Right.
year's
Okay,
fine.
you're
He's
talking
going to
about the
take
ninth
2
grader.
tests. I'm talking about my 9th grader this year is taking
the
one
ninth-
geometry test.
That's correct.
But next year, he would theoretically only take
And he
one
will
Common
only-
Core Algebra 2.
And he will only be allowed to take the one Algebra 2 Common Core exam. And that's
Okay,
the exam
with
he
the
will be prepared
statistics.
for. He will be prepared for that because we will have probably 3 administrations of the Algebra 2 Common Core to
But
again,
he's
to be based.
not going to have trouble with pre-calc in junior year because he didn't take enough trig. Did I miss something?
Did you want to take that?
No, you didn't miss anything. Can I just say something on that? No, you heard it correctly the first time, and you're hearing it again. There is a very real issue with that. Let me just say that the jury's still out on exactly what's going to happen with that group of children, because it is clear that the state is going to move in a new direction. They're telling us that the curriculum is going to be ready sometime next year. I think as an interim measure, they may have to allow for one more year, even though they haven't done it in the past, the administration of the 2005, well, in fact, they put this new course into place. There's got to be some kind of an interim step, because if they're going to require everyone to sit for a course which is not going to be there the following year, what are they doing to this one group of kids? It's just not fair. And we understand that. We're working on it at this point, and more to come. I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you tonight, but there is no answer. And the reason why he was kind of walking around it is that there is no answer yet. But I'm very, very cognizant of the problem you're talking about, and hopefully we will have some kind of an answer before the end of the school year, certainly before September when your children are going to be involved in that new course. All right, thank you great question, thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't sure when I was saying it the first time it was clearly understood. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Groshans. My daughter is in Watson in 3rd grade. I've actually reached out to Boston University and Binghamton University, my alums, to try to understand how this is going to get processed into college applications and college admissions. And I guess in my review of that, my understanding is Mr. David Coleman, who developed Common Core, is now the chairman of the College Board, and they're the ones administrating the SAT tests. My understanding is most of the students coming through this district will take the SAT tests in preparation for that. And, you know, her mother and I are deciding whether my child should sit this year in 3rd grade for this or not. I guess I'm kind of hearing we can opt out because there's going to be a lot of changes in the next 2 or 3 years. But I'm still concerned about how, when Common Core is being implemented here in Rockville Center, as well in, I believe it's 42 other states, how that starts to filter in to the admissions process. And I do appreciate your comments on, you know, you're looking at the rigor of the academics, you're looking at the program and how they challenge themselves. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the first cut comes down to your SAT scores and your GPA before they start digging further into what was the rigor of it, right? If you have a 1.7 and you get a 400 on your SAT, you're probably not going to get another look at the university. Whereas if you're in competition, you're getting 1,600 and 4.0, and then maybe they'll start looking a little deeper. So I know it's a little over the map, but any comments you have would be appreciated.
Don't buy stock in the SAT. David Coleman, you're absolutely right, was the person responsible for developing the Common Core, and in fact then moved over and now has been the person responsible for developing the SAT. Not everybody believes that its shelf life is going to be as long as you might. So your daughter or son in third grade may in fact be experiencing a very, very different test when they have an opportunity to take it about 7 or 8 years from now. The Common Core, for whatever it may be worth, you're right, it was part of 43 states. It was adopted by 43 or 47 states. I think there are 6 or 7 states left in that consortium. So I won't say that it's been abandoned entirely. What New York State has said, it's going to base its new standards on the Common Core, but it's going to be calling them something very different when in fact they come out at the end of this school year. There are a number of people who feel that we should be taking the ACT, and there are a lot of schools that are moving in that direction because of the decision that was made by David Coleman to in fact create a test. Colleges and universities, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with it either. So the jury's still out on that one as well. It's a very complicated issue and a complicated problem, and states may in fact reverse themselves and start moving in different directions that do not prepare kids adequately for the SATs. So, more to come. I don't know. John or Donald?
I agree. If it were true that the Common Core was somehow detrimental, this was the first year that we offered the new PSAT, which is being modeled on the new version of the SAT. And our scores were commensurate within the past. Actually, they went up a little bit. And this is the group of students who are taking them, the 10th graders, who we're all worried about the most because they've been the first one through. So we've seen no negative impact on standardized testing, especially the SAT. And I do think, as Dr. Johnson said, this also accounts for the large growth in the number of students taking the ACT. I mean, their growth has been exponential. Number one, because it's been a known entity, and number two, students have experienced with success. If I was an outsider looking in, I would also argue that the SAT modifications that they're making now are not based on the Common Core, but they're based on their competition. The test is starting to look more ACT-like, not for educational reasons, but because they understand that they have someone breathing down their neck, maybe for the first time in a generation. And again, it is a data point in terms of the college admissions process.
Take the ACT?
Sure.
Yes.
It's very, very popular now.
We offer it here. I also want to just really long-range planning. There's now about 900 colleges that don't even require the SAT or the ACT. That's up from about 300 when I started as a counselor in 2001. So that's also a...
Thanks. I was going to bring up the same point that more and more colleges and universities are in fact making it optional, as we know, for the either SAT or the ACT. But the other point that Dr. Johnson mentioned, the fact that New York is going to be rewriting the standards. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the Common Core is not necessarily going away. As you said, they are pretty good. I think one of the things that's happened is that they've gotten a bad name because they've been in the press a lot. Yep. But, you know, it's like the old saying, if you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. So we may call them something else, but they're not going to be that different from the Common Core, which by many people's estimation are quite good. So.
Good evening. My name is Marianne Monroy. I have 3 boys in the school district, middle schooler and 2 in Riverside. First of all, it's been a great experience with all the schools we've been involved with. My 4th grader is the one I'm mostly concerned about and why I came here. I thought this would talk about a lot about graduation requirements, and particularly Regents versus non-Regents diplomas. I just came to my attention within the last 6 months or so that New York requires Regents diploma. When I grew up in New York, I had an option of a non-Regents diploma. I did get a Regents diploma, but that was my choice at the time. So when I addressed this with Riverside, and I have a child with some special needs, but doing excellent there, but I don't know whether or not he will be able to take a Regents or pass a Regents. And so is it then his lot in life then that he can't get a high school diploma, or potentially not get a high school Regents diploma in New York and not be able to apply to a college or even a community college, when other states, and I could be totally misinformed, don't require a Regents diploma, and then they can apply to New York community colleges or whatever else, and my child won't necessarily be able to get a high school diploma because he can't pass a Regents.
Well, let me start by just giving you some numbers. Last year, 100% of our graduates graduated with a Regents diploma, including our special needs students.
Well, I have to say that gives me a lot of comfort, because I really haven't gotten a clear answer on what happens to the kids that have some special needs. Now, he's doing excellent, but he's a fourth grader. I don't know.
There are, for lack of a better word, safety nets in place for special needs, but I think it's a little premature to engage those safety nets in the fourth grade. Just to understand, a Regents diploma, as well as our own credit requirements, means passing 5 Regents exams. Our students passed the algebra Regents in the 8th grade. So for all intents and purposes, a student who passes the algebra Regents has fulfilled the math requirement for a Regents diploma. Okay, just to put it into context. The other exams occur as they're going through their high school career. Earth Science is again offered in the 8th grade, so we're talking about 5 Regents exams. There are also safety nets in place for special needs students. There's a low pass option of 55, in which case the student can earn a local diploma, as well as another safety net where a student can get a 45 to 55 on one exam, assuming that they can compensate for it with another grade higher than a 65 in any exam other than English and algebra. So there's a number of safety nets in place, but please take it in the context that we have 100% Regents diploma rate, regular Regents diploma rate for all students, including our special needs population.
Well, it's good to know, because I just, don't get a lot of that information, and I'm told just not to worry about it, but I'm worried about it.
Don't worry about it.
I would also add that I think a lot of the angst in parents of students with disabilities, special needs, is that they feel that the local diploma or the Regents diploma is their only track, and that the local diploma options with a Regents competency test has been taken away. The Regents competency test, when that was put into place, was really not supposed to be a permanent measure. It was put there when students with disabilities were making the transition from pretty much self-contained small classes to fully integrated into the Regents curriculum across New York State. So it was never the intention of the state to keep that RCT exam long-term. So when they phased it out, and they started talking about phasing it out about 4 or 5 years ago, or longer than that, I'm sorry, they started phasing it out longer than that, they said, we will have other options, and those are the options that Mr. Murphy just listed for you. So I'm not going to tell you just don't worry about it, but I will tell you that you should take some comfort in the fact that our success rate in getting students through a Regents diploma program is excellent, because Dr. Johnson, with great foresight, a long time ago said that we're going to heterogeneously group our classes and differentiate our instruction such that all kids have an opportunity to learn and to reach their highest heights. So that's going to be our go-to and where we're going for special education, and certainly all students, but special education included.
Hi, my name is Elise Goodstein, and I have a 4th grader and a 7th grader. And I just have a question about the tests, the logistics of the test now that it's untimed. If my children take the test and they finish in an hour, and there are other children who are taking the test who are taking longer, what happens to my children that have finished the test?
Darren, what? Either one, either at the middle school, go ahead.
The state's allowed that it's 90 minutes that they're taking the test, say in the middle school each day. So even if a student finishes in 1 hour, they're going to stay in that testing location until the end of that 1 hour. Until the hour and a half, the 90 minutes are up. If students are going to need longer than that, then we're going to move them to a different location for them to continue working on the test. After the 90-minute session, we then go to a modified bell schedule where classes are only about 22 minutes or 23 minutes for the rest of the day. But anyone, whether you're in a non-testing or a testing location, you're in that location for the 90 minutes until that's over, and then we move on.
When they say untimed, do they really mean untimed? A kid can take it for days? I mean, what does that mean?
We don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not sure that we're not going to win.
I cannot imagine one middle school child who's going to say, oh, Ms. McGinn, can I come back tomorrow and do this again? I just don't see it.
One of the values I thought in the test, whether or not you believe in the questions, just the practice of trying to complete a task in a finite amount of time. I thought there was a value in that. But it seems that the state has decided that there's no value in that.
Yeah, just so we understand, not that we want to get technical about it, but that's the way in which the test was standardized initially. It was done within a time frame. Now that they've introduced the concept of untimed, it is rather interesting that we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea what the results are going to look like.
I do just want to add that the school administrator's manual says you can extend the day, so it won't go on. Kids can't come back and finish book one the next day. So once this school day ends, that book one you can't return to. So it does say that in the manual.
But they can come back the next day.
Not to do book one.
Not to do book one.
No, there's 3 days of the book one is one day, book two, book three for ELA, and then for math. But for the untimed piece, it says you cannot extend the school day for one book. That's from my understanding of the manual. I'll look right now again, double check, but I'm pretty sure it says that.
I think I read that too.
Yeah, I believe it does say
Yes.
that.
I don't really think it goes
Related to that, we had a question by email. What does an untimed test mean for students who get accommodations, like double time or time and a half?
Double infinity.
I don't know how you put a number on that. A really long time.
Just so you know, the untimed version of that trumps everything. So once it's untimed for all students.
Okay, I had another email question, and then I'll get to yours. I read in Newsday that districts which have too many opt-outs will lose funding. Can you explain if that is true?
There was a letter written by somebody in the Federal Department of Education to the state, which was then shared with other people within the school districts throughout New York State. There was kind of a veiled threat that monies could be lost if, in fact, if we didn't meet the threshold of 95%. We have, in fact, spoken to people in Washington, D.C. We've spoken to our own legislators. No one has the stomach or the will to do that. I'm not quite sure why that was written, except that maybe they felt the necessity of putting something in writing about the subject. That is particularly true in an election year. It's just not going to happen, particularly since we're going to have, in all likelihood, a new administration. Well, we will have a new administration in January of next year. It's not going to happen.
Hi, I have middle schooler, high schoolers, and one still at Hewitt. In the past, my kids have opted out, and I've kept them home and brought them in late, just so they're not part of the problem of where to put them, and I felt like wasteful time. So is that still okay to do with the untimed test? Like, do they ever come back to school?
I'll defer to the principals.
Do they ever go to class?
Yeah. Well, talk about what you're doing, what we're going to be doing.
I think that, that's a very valid question. We obviously want to provide an environment for the children who are taking the test, the optimum experience for them to take it. We also want to provide the kids who are not taking the test an opportunity to do something productive. We're kind of in a crossroads. We don't want to teach anything brand new, because then the kids who are taking the test will not be afforded that opportunity. And I think we also want to do more than just have the children just sit there and read for 6 days and draw art projects. We want to do something meaningful. So we are working together right now as a district, and it will be the same in all elementary schools, to come up with something for the students to do where they are involved in a meaningful activity, whether it be individually or collaboratively, that doesn't appear very exciting for the kids that are taking the test, because, you know, look, the reality is it's all about the kids. We don't want the kids who are taking the test to feel that they're missing out on something great. We don't want the kids who are not taking the test to not be doing something substantial. So we're kind of drawing the lines of what we're going to do. We will do some independent reading. We will probably do some areas of art, but we're also going to do something of a lot of relearning, things that the students currently know, and asking them to do, whether it's problems or collaborative work with one another. We've decided as a district, because it's a very dicey area with technology, students will not be involved in the elementary school in any sort of technology during the 6 days, meaning during the testing time, they won't be doing iPad-based projects. Even though that is a major part of our curriculum and the students are using it, we don't want it to appear, for the kids' sake, that they're getting to do something that's, you know, taking a test or using the iPad. If you're a child, what do you want to do? You want to use the iPad. So I think we're going to come up with activities, and we're still working on that right now. It's also going to depend on how many kids are opting out. And I think as logistics go too, it's the same thing. We can't answer some of these questions until we know how many students in each school, in each class are doing that. Hence, Dr. Johnson sent out that letter, and we can get moving with it.
How does that apply to the middle school? That's the question.
What are the kids who are opting out going to do at the middle school?
They will be either reading, or we're also trying to come up with some activities for them to do. Last year, all of the teachers put together different packets from the different curricular areas, and the students could pick and choose. And I know this is going to sound like so much fun, but it could be like an earth science puzzle, or, you know, find your rocks, or something to do in mathematics, things that were more interesting, but again, it's review of what they've learned and things they need to know. It could be vocabulary puzzles or reviews or things like that. And the students actually liked them, but that's their reading, or they're doing something like that.
How does that work with the class changes, you know, the different periods?
There is no, we actually set a testing time, a very specific 90-minute testing time. Okay. And then once that ends, we go into, I think it's 22 or 23-minute class periods, except for periods 5, 6, and 7, because they have to eat lunch. So those are the normal 39-minute periods. And we go through the school day. They follow their regular class scheduled with shortened periods after the testing time is over.
So during the testing time, they'll get a choice of things to do, or will they be assigned to a certain?
No, they'll get a choice. We'll have, like, we had a cart on each. We had, say 6th grade was on the first floor, 7th and 8th, like it went like that, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. We had a cart of materials that, like, people just sort of wandered around and said, you know, and the proctors would come out and ask, oh, can we have more of these, or we'd like to do that. And it's all really just teacher-made materials. You know, it's like doing Mad Libs or something, like that kind of idea, but in an educational forum.
We're limited in what we can do. We cannot do anything to advance the curriculum, and we are not supposed to do anything that would make it so attractive that our classrooms for kids who are opting out, in and of themselves, become a reason why somebody would opt out.
Right.
So that it's troublesome. I wish it were otherwise. But there are 6 days of instruction involved in this thing, and we don't want to lose time, but we want to give kids an opportunity to do something meaningful, and where review is possible, we might be get involved in activities similar to that.
Hi, my name is Melissa Benko. I have 2 children at Hewitt, 5th and 2nd grade. I am a high school guidance counselor at Roslyn High School, so I have some perspective and an appreciation for what you guys are going through. My concern is, and I don't really have a question, I just was wondering if you could address this concern, is for the elementary school kids who have been going through this and through the ups and downs of the testing. And my concern is that they've missed an education, and so much time is spent on test prep. And I was just wondering if any of you could kind of comment on that, about what possibly they will be lacking in their education.
I think as far as test prep goes, we've always taken the notion that we need to teach the kids the skills and strategies they need for success. It's not just about, it's not about test prep, it's about giving them the skills to be critical thinkers, to answer higher level questions. So I think that we've always done that. We're still preparing the kids for those exact sorts of things. You are right, it is 6 days that the state is putting us through where, and that's why what Dr. Johnson said is so critical. We want an assessment that can assess our children, because otherwise this is a complete mishmash of logistics. What do we do with kids? We can't provide them with new opportunities. We don't want to make it more attractive. So I think that we're just in, we're in a crossroads. We are. Until this is settled, we can't really answer that, except that I can tell you that I know that in all the schools, we are teaching the kids the skills and strategies they need through guided reading, through every curricula area, based on Bloom's taxonomy, differentiating instruction. And I know those are buzzwords, but that's really what we do. And that, I think that good teaching is good teaching. And as far as wasting time, I think the 6 days for kids who take the test or don't take the test, it can be a waste of time. And you're not wrong about that. We can't change that until...
Been wonderful. My concern isn't the 6 days. It's just more of an overall, like my daughter's in 2nd grade. My son, I feel like, I don't know if he's prepared for middle school. I'm not quite sure. And again, it has nothing to do with the teaching. It's just to do with what we're talking about tonight. So my concern is just, I'm hoping they didn't really miss so much because the state has made us be so focused on these tests and preparing for the tests, and we're not going to do this test, and we're going to do this test, and that's just my concern.
And it's a valid concern, but I think that in some school districts it would be a concern that they're teaching so much for a test. I don't think we do that. We've never done that. And I think that you can be assured that your child will be as best prepared for the middle school based on the curriculum and based on what we do in Rockville Center, rather than the test.
And I think that we've always been, our philosophy is to embed test prep within our curriculum. So it's not that you're getting a packet that comes home and says ELA Book 1, read this passage and answer these 7 questions. Any assignment that's given, say, at the middle school models whatever assessments they have to take. So they're taking, when they're doing science questions, they're based on what their science regents is going to look like. I don't think the students are missing out on anything. I think the only thing they're missing out on is being handed test prep booklets and made to do them over and over. We don't do that. We embed it within our curriculum. So, and he'll be fine for the middle school.
Michelle?
Yeah, and
No
I was
worries.
going to say, just to echo what Mr. Raymer was saying, that it's good teaching throughout the day, all year, without focus on the test itself, but it's focusing on addressing the standards. And I could speak from a reading perspective that we're building foundational skills for kids, from decoding to comprehension, building higher vocabulary. The kids, I can speak, I work at Covert School, the test is not even an issue or a concern for children. It's not even a thought in their mind. We don't even discuss it. It's just good teaching to build stronger readers, stronger mathematicians, strong problem solvers. So I don't look at it like we're wasting time to address a test at all.
Michelle, what do you do with the NWEA?
Yeah, I was also going to say that there are so many measures that we look at to determine a student's strengths and areas of weakness. So we take the NWEA, take a look at where that child's RIT score is, what percentile that puts that child in, and we could look at a grade equivalency. We look
People
at
don't know what a
growth.
RIT score is.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Okay.
yeah. An actual score in the assessment will tell us where that child falls in terms of a percentile. So a 4th grader, we can look at, are they at the 50th percentile, 65th, and so on. But aside from that, throughout the school year, there's ongoing informal assessment, be it informal reading inventories, classroom teacher assessments that, in my opinion, are much better constructed than the state assessments and give us a lot more information that we can use to then better address our teaching. So.
And let me also just add that, even if they give the best test in the world in New York State, the reality is, for a child who's had a bad week, had a fight at home, had something going on in their life, they're going to not do as well as they potentially could. So that's why we use multiple ways of assessing children, both informally and formally, and we always will.
Christy, were you going to add something?
I just wanted to add that as your child leaves the elementary world and entering the middle school, that we do have communication amongst the teachers in the middle school to make sure that there are certain topics that are covered, certain topics that maybe the elementary school we didn't cover as much. We let the middle school teachers know so they know that's an area where they might have to pre-teach or keep teaching until they get to the topics that they need to be. So the communication is open from the elementary school to the middle school as well.
Jean Harris, Ludwig, 10th grader, 7th grader. And two things, a technical question about the testing for sophomores, because they're supposed to take the 2 math tests this year, with the Common Core one deviating largely from the 2005 standards, correct?
Yes.
Is opting out an option on the Common Core?
No.
I thought you said no, but
I'm
I just
sorry.
wanted to
No.
clarify.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
No, you have to take both, I'm sorry.
In order to get to the second one.
Correct.
Right.
They've thought of that.
Captive.
Yeah.
Captive. And then the other thing I just want to emphasize, we're all here interested in the testing. It is one small piece of what our children have to know and perform when they go on in life. How much of this testing is the actual application of the knowledge? And as Darren said, I want my kids to be able to handle the social and emotional issues of schooling and life, perhaps even more so than the content of the tests.
Did everyone just look at the clock? 9 o'clock. We had 7:30 to 9. Isn't that interesting? Well, any other questions?
That was a tough act to follow.
Wait, Donna, over here.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify about the kind of follow up on the funding question. You say it's not going to happen that they would withhold funds, but is that a possibility? However unlikely?
I can't rule it out as a possibility, but it's highly unlikely. If you're dealing with probabilities, we're near 0. Close to 0 as you can get. All right. Listen, just 2 things I just want to finish up with. One, I want to thank Kathy Baxley and Donna Downing. They are just the backbone of... And secondly of all, we're not the largest crowd we've ever had before, but quality counts. And I really want to thank all of you for coming tonight and engaging us in a conversation. It's very, very important. This is part of your life, your children's education. We take it very seriously. And most importantly, what we really appreciate more than anything else, the fact that you're engaged with your children on a regular basis and want to share that with us. So thank you very, very much for being with us tonight. I hope it's been informative. Your questions help us frame what we do. So again, thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you soon again.